A lot happened here in Lagos within the week when the presidential candidate of All Progressives Congress and a former governor of Lagos State, Bola Tinubu, reached out to business leaders from Nigeria's private sector as he continues to plot his way to the presidency of Nigeria. What were the high points of his presentation, and how are his plans and programs speaking to the very problems besetting the country at this point in time? Well, joining us now to hopefully dissect these matters is Ajuri Ngelale, Assistant Principal Spokesperson of the All Progressives Congress Presidential Campaign Council. Good morning, Ajuri.
Truly a privilege to be with you this morning.
Have you in the studio?
Thank you very much.
It's the first time in the studio, isn't it?
Indeed, first time.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Well, I mean, let's dissect the manifesto, shall we call it, of the APC. And I think that was the plank upon which the presidential candidate of your party, engaged with the organized private sector in Lagos during the week. A renewed hope, he calls it. And a lot of people are trying to interrogate that.
Right.
It's not trying to give hope. It's not saying that there would be change. It says that we're trying to renew hope. Is that an acknowledgement of the fact that Nigerians have been battered in the last 7.5 years, and therefore, rather than talk about change that brought the party in 2015, what your presidential candidate is suffering? It's a palliative. It's a kind of, don't lose hope. We're here to try to make things better. Is it an acknowledgement of a failure of the last 7.5 years?
Thank you very much, Steve, for the profound question, and obviously for the privilege of being with you this morning. I think first and foremost, it's for us to appreciate that when we say renewed hope, it is not in any way, and we must be very, I must emphasize this, it is not in any way an indictment or a negative judgment against the administration of His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari. Rather, it is a very pragmatic acknowledgement that we have gone through 2 major economic recessions, and most recently, a once-in-a-century global pandemic. These are realities. After that, after a pandemic from which the world has not even yet fully recovered, if you go to places like China and others, you would see the impact it has continued to have on the economic growth of even economic giants around the world. You now have the Russia-Ukrainian conflict creating all sorts of problems around international food security, around the mobilization of various supply chains and all of that, logistics challenges around the world. You've also seen the impact that's had on oil and gas supply and demand and availability and, of course, pricing. So it's an acknowledgement that this is the international climate in which we are currently operating, and the fact that that has brought unprecedented rates of inflation, not just in Nigeria, but around the world. This is reality, right? So we acknowledge where we are as a nation within this global context, and what we're saying to our people is that even in view of these international challenges, that we cannot lose sight of the fact that things would be much worse today in Nigeria if President Muhammadu Buhari had not done several things. Number one, massively substituted our imports with local production. So, for example, you would recall that in 2014-2015, we could not even fund our federal budgets. Why was that? It was because we were paying out $3-4 billion annually for rice imports, rice that we could be growing locally. So what Mr. President did immediately he came into office said, look, we must empower our farmers to be able to massively and rapidly increase our food production to replace these imports so that we can utilize that scarce foreign exchange that we're earning on funding our budget, building roads, bridges, airports, seaports, power plants, MSME capitalization, social investment programs, and all of the other things that he's been able to accomplish. So this is what it is. So when we look at the manifesto now, because that's what you referred to,
that's right.
When we say renewed hope, there are a few various elements that I think we should focus on. One is the fact that throughout the campaign manifesto, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, actively and very intentionally gives credit to President Muhammadu Buhari across sectors for laying a successful foundation upon which he can now build. We recognize that you're talking of 4 or 5 decades of maladministration, of infrastructural deficit and neglect, that President Muhammadu Buhari has worked so hard in a very limited time, a very limited amount of time, 7.5 years, with very limited resources, 2 economic recessions, 1 pandemic, and almost consistently low oil prices until just very recently. In fact, during the pandemic, you remember, it went down to as low as $10 per barrel. So in spite of all of that, what do we have? Just here in the Southwest, Lagos Shagamu Ibadan Expressway, the Lagos Abeokuta Ibadan rail line, the Apapa Oronshoki Tollgate Road, the Apapa Wharf. I mean, there's just so many various projects that have been done, not just in the Southwest, but across the country. You go to the South, go and look at the 200 billion naira Boni Bodo Road, which is going to link the mainland of this country to our gas production headquarters on Bonny Island for the first time in history. That's going to be done over the course of the next one year. Then if you go to the Southeast, of course, we have the nearly 300 billion naira second Niger bridge.
Ajuri, sorry to butt in.
Yes, please.
If the manifesto was meant to celebrate the 7.5 years of Buhari.
But that's not what it's meant for.
Exactly, so it wouldn't say renewed hope. It wouldn't say renewed hope. The renewed hope to me and to a number of people is to try to send some assurance.
No, but Steve, this is exactly
to Nigerians.
But this is exactly what I'm saying.
But that's not what you're speaking to.
No, I am speaking to that because I started by acknowledging that we are operating in an international climate that is dealing with a global economic crisis. That is where we are, my brother. You cannot separate Nigeria as a kind of a silo in an international community. We're in a globalized economic environment where what happens in one country affects energy prices, it affects logistics, it affects supply chains, it affects everything. These are the realities. I mean, we can't run away from that. So when we say renewed hope, we're referring to these economic realities that are now global. Whether it's inflation, whether it is the rising cost of borrowing, whether it is increasing interest rates, these are things that are not happening just in Nigeria. Whether it's currency devaluation, these are things that are not just happening in Nigeria. Just in October, Japan paid 43 billion US dollars to support its currency. In 1 month, 43 billion dollars of its reserves to support the Japanese yen against the US dollar because of the economic crisis in the world. Nigeria is not separate from that. But the point I am making is that the notion that the renewed hope is relative to President Muhammadu Buhari's performance is absolutely false. It is against the international reality we're facing. And within the manifesto, the last point I want to make on this is that on page 5 of the manifesto, we talk about security. We publicly and very intentionally acknowledge what President Muhammadu Buhari had achieved in terms of like massive armament of the various branches of the military, new battleships and ship landing tapes for the Navy, new fighter jets and gunship-laden helicopters for the Air Force, new armored personnel carriers, drones, and small ammunitions that are being produced within Nigeria for the first time, for the Army, and all of that. Same thing in agriculture. We made sure we gave credit to President Muhammadu Buhari for laying the foundation with the Enga Barrows program, over 1 trillion naira to 3 million farmers across the country, which has allowed us to massively substitute our imports. So the point is we're building on a good foundation. Now the question is, what is His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu now bringing to the table in terms of interventions, modifications to existing reforms, to accelerate them and to optimize them for the future of the nation's economy? And that is what I'm here to discuss.
All right, probably let me backpedal a little bit.
Sure.
Dele Momodu says rather than renewed hope, it's a forlorn hope, being that this particular manifesto was just rehashed. Hope 93 has been rehashed to become renewed hope. And if they decided to do that, it's almost insulting the intelligence of Nigerians and almost saying that the APC do not even understand and not trying to come to terms with the peculiarities that Nigerians face in terms of the myriad of problems that we see today, to be able to help us probably navigate into the future when you're using a document of well over 20 years in 2023. We know the APC have denied this, but Dele Momodu is still insistent that this document that has been presented has been plagiarized.
Thank you very much. You know, this comes back to some of the challenges we have in our public discourse, where anybody can wake up from sleep and say anything and we treat it as serious news. We should treat as serious things that have basis in fact. So, for example, if somebody wakes up one morning and says the president has 1,000 wives around the world, do we now say that the president has 1,000 wives and I should now sit down with you and be debating with you whether or not it is true or false? That's not how things are done. Look, Dele Momodu has a position with the opposition campaign. He's the director, if I'm not mistaken, of strategic communications. It is his responsibility to say whatever he thinks is in the interest of his candidate. Hopefully, he anchors his arguments on fact rather than innuendo and speculation.
But he's saying that he's based on facts.
But what is the fact around plagiarism? Have they even attempted to show you a document that says this is where they copied from? Of course not, because they know they don't have such, because it's an original document. So all he can do is make a claim, hoping that professionals like you will continue to echo it and repeat it on air so that it will seem true. What I am saying is this. First of all, that's false. So let's just put that to bed. Now, to the point that he's making about Hope 93, I think some people will prey on what they perceive to be low intelligence of voters in this country, which is absolutely wrong. Nigerians are brilliant people, and they're discerning people. If you're somebody that does not have substance or content to discuss, they can see through your suit, right? So what we're saying is that on the issue of the notion of rehashing the Hope 93 manifesto or campaign pledge, the silliness of that claim is the fact that it is an entirely different and transformed international environment, national environment, domestic environment from what obtained in 1993. What was on ground in 1993 is not on ground today. The international realities are not the same. So the notion that we would tailor a document around a totally different international and domestic reality is actually foolishness when you think about it. What we're saying is very clearly is that when you do not, and I've said this before on a different network which I will not name out of respect for your network, I said one of the things that you see consistently from spokespersons of the People's Democratic Party, and there's a reason for it, is that they spend an overwhelming amount of their time, right, trying to, kind of foment innuendos, insinuations, things that you cannot quite pin down. They're quite abstract. And they will make these statements because they want to distract Nigerians from the fact that they had double the time and double the money to do something for the country. And they cannot tell you how many 100-kilometer federal roads that they started construction and completed construction on. They cannot tell you how many high-speed rail lines that they started construction and completed construction on. We're talking 16 years, almost a generation. They cannot tell you even the old colonial era rail lines that we're talking about, that were there since the 60s, 50s, 60s. They cannot tell you which ones they started rehabilitation on and completed rehabilitation on. All that money and all that time. They cannot tell you social investment programs. They cannot tell you MSME capitalization on a large scale. They cannot tell you how they empowered millions of farmers. My point, my brother, is that they literally, I've asked any PDP member in the country, high or low, or anybody who sympathizes with PDP, it's a very simple question. Can you just name these things? And what they will say to you, they will say, APC has failed. They will use punch words, these punch words that they enjoy so much: poverty, insecurity, failure. When you ask them point blank, okay, describe to me that failure. I want to know exactly what you mean when you say failure relative to your performance, because we are not running elections. Well,
some will say that the dollar, for example, where you look at the dollar in 2015.
I'm happy to get into that. Happy to get into that. But let me just make this last point. If we're not running against Jesus Christ or the Prophet Muhammad, we're not running against the moon. We're running against Alhaji Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party. That's who we're running against. So you are comparing. These are two political parties who have held power. One for 8 years, one for 16 years. Mm-hmm. One with double the money, one with half the money. You will look at the outcomes, the physical and soft outcomes of both parties. My challenge and my question is that when you assess this one that had double the money and double the time, and I'm asking you just a very basic question. Can you name these things? Not a single genius like Dele Momodu and all their geniuses that they send out to talk. None of them can tell you what they did because they have nothing to discuss.
But the APC also
they will always defend themselves.
Yes.
No, 16 years of PDP.
Yes.
Different people will look at it from different.
No, but we're talking hard infrastructure. I'm talking about things that you can touch and verify. My point is, you cannot make up what you didn't do, and that's the point.
That's fine. Now,
we can tell you what we did.
Let's focus on what your presidential candidate will do.
Absolutely.
And in specific time, I want to go into an important issue that came up at the meeting with the organized private sector. Revenue generation, which has been the major problem of the Buhari administration, which is the whole point of why he has kept on borrowing. I know that you have spoken a whole lot about the fact that is the dollarization of what was borrowed, that is the issue, but not the fact that cumulatively about $40 billion in 7.5 years has been borrowed. So 2 questions in one. How will your candidate, if he becomes the president, tackle the issue of revenue generation?
Fantastic.
Will he have to borrow more, given the fact that we have done more than, whether you are comfortable with the dollar aspect of it, or other Nigerians who are saying that we are dealing with, 40-something trillion here. How will he deal with it? And then in specific terms, as to what happened at the meeting with the business people, one of his key financial strategists, Mr. Wale Edun, who was the commissioner for finance in Lagos in those days, took to the podium and said that revenue generation would be a problem, but that they have a solution for it, which will be, as I put it, to boost tax revenue, to boost it. And he tried to explain that they won't necessarily increase tax, but to boost it. My question to you, how does the what's it called, Manifesto address that? Will he import the Lagos model to Abuja of using consultants, tax consultants, to boost the revenue base of government? In other words, will Alpha Beta have a place in Asiwaju's government?
I see where you're going now. First of all, I think it is a bit of a spurious attempt at a black mark on the candidate of the APC to name a name of a company that some people have said that he is aligned with, or he belongs to, or he has some sort of affiliation with, when such had not been proven in the court of law.
I think that's not my intention.
No. But
my intention
whether it's your intention or not,
no,
I understand what you have said. I understand what you're saying. What I am saying, but he did not talk about Alpha Beta individually.
So I'm asking, how will he
my dear brother, yes, I will answer you, but I just want to make clear, because it's my responsibility, that in the court of law, nothing of such has been proven, and we should be very careful about the allusions and innuendos that we, even unintentionally, maybe in your case, put into the public domain. Now, with that said, there are a few things. If you don't mind, I just want to address the currency question, because he raised it, and then I'll answer your question right after that. Very quick, and I'm going to answer you on tax, I assure you. The currency question is something that Nigerians have been asking me a lot about, and I'm happy to answer the question. Obviously, everybody is seeing the black market rate of the Naira collapse, right? We're all watching it happen and all of that. Now, the challenge we have with this question is that when you talk about the PDP years, right, they will say, you people have been in power for 7 years. Why are you talking about PDP, right? That's generally the response. The problem is that we operate in a public sector environment where obviously government is a continuum. What you get is what you will be working with, right? Which is why we're talking about Buhari into what can potentially be the Tinubu years. Now, we had an excess crude account that was opened in 2004. And it is still currently in existence. From 2004, and most Nigerians don't know this, which is why I'm taking the time to explain it very quickly. From 2004 to 2015, my dear brother, please do the investigation. All of our viewers, do the investigation. From 2004 to 2015, 107 billion US dollars. I say 107 billion US dollars inflowed into the excess crude account. By the time Mr. President took office, President Muhammadu Buhari took office in 2015, there was $2 billion in that account, meaning that 105 billion out of 107 billion was spent on what we don't know. Nobody can tell you this is what we did with it.
That's in the public domain.
Yes, now, because of that, these are the reserves you use to bolster your currency. Yes. You have a foreign reserve that was at almost $50-60 billion when Obasanjo left office. He built that reserve. When we inherited, what we inherited was 28 billion, something that is barely enough for 6 months of emergency action on the economy if there's an international crisis, right?
What Obasanjo built, by the way, is part of the PDP success? That
No, I acknowledge that, but I also acknowledge that a PDP president came and spent all of it. So that's still PDP.
That's fine. Yeah.
Now, with that said, excess crude account exhausted, foreign reserves exhausted, right? Now you come into office, there's international shock. Right now, I just mentioned to you that Japan has paid $43 billion. I did not say in a year. $43 billion in the month of October to protect the Japanese yen value against the US dollar. We have right now in our reserves, how much do we even have? We're working hard to have $40 billion in our entire foreign reserve. Right now, because there has not been consistently high international oil price over the Buhari years, the excess crude account has not grown. I just want to say,
Saudi Aramco, those in Norway,
yes,
in the last 1 year or so have actually surpassed record profits. More than ever before, the Ukraine-Russia crisis has meant that oil prices have been at the premium, and several people have been celebrating that this is too good to be true.
No, I hear what you're
But here in Nigeria, more than ever before, we are still talking about 90% of our oil revenue. When we're supposed to be celebrating,
we're actually the only oil-producing country that has not benefited from the.
We cannot even meet our quota.
Now listen.
So you have to put that balance down.
Absolutely. Now, listen. Now, first of all, Norway's own is a bit of a different case, because they are not like us in terms of oil production and drilling. That is not where the mass of their income comes from. The mass of their income comes from oil servicing, all of the various logistics, building oil. Drilling platforms and all of that. Most of their stuff comes from servicing. When you talk Aramco, you're talking of a producer that is the most prolific in the world. You're talking of a producer that had not had the kind of decades of consistent maladministration within their state-run oil outfit that we had suffered under PDP and even under the military. So it's very difficult to apples compare such a scenario, which is why we have to be clear when we're talking about parties what the differences are. Now, what I'm saying to you is this. Just to land the point, there's no magic to currency value maintenance, right? There's no magic to it. Either you have the funds to bolster your currency when things are bad, or you don't have the funds and you watch it slide. And I'm telling you that there's a reason why we do not have those funds, and that reason goes back to the fact that we spent 105 out of 107 billion for no reason, when that should have been the reserve for days like today.
Okay, Ajuri, that may be valid.
It's absolutely valid.
But then that's just one part of it.
It's one part of it, yes.
Which will now go to what your candidate, again, that's the whole point.
Now we're going into
we'll do differently.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just sufficient to say that if you do not have backup. What about the fact that consistently, at least all through the 7.5 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, we have run a two-way forex exchange mechanism?
No, it comes back. It's coming. See, it comes back to the same. See, this is what we're saying.
Will Asiwaju float the naira if he becomes the president?
Okay, so now when we talk about foreign exchange management, I think His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu has been very, very clear that we have to. How are we going to add value to the naira? Mainly, what we're going to do are a few things. We have to make very concrete investments in building a proper national consumer credit system. That's going to be very, very fundamental to this whole thing. Why do I say so?
Ajuri, I asked a direct question.
I'm answering you now. Let me land my. You have not allowed me to land my answer.
All right, that's fine.
So you're saying you're asking me the question: is he going to float the naira?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I think he's very clear.
Because you can't have
I'm coming.
The CBN selling at 400.
Yes.
And then people are waiting in the wings.
He has.
To sell at 800
there's nothing to run away from. The campaign manifesto says very clearly that he wants to unify the exchange rates of this country.
Great.
He is going to manage. He's going to manage. He believes that we have to first of all unify it so that everybody domestically and internationally agrees that this is the value of the naira. But he believes in not a float, because there are some people that just say float the naira and see what the market's going to do with it. That's not what he believes in. What he believes in, unifying the exchange rate in what we would call a managed float. So it's calibrated. It's not a float. That's very, very important to notify, differentiate. Now, in building a consumer credit system, it's going to have an impact on all spheres of the economy. Number one, right now we know that a major motivator of corruption in this country has to do with the fact that we ask Nigerians to go above and beyond their legitimate salaries in order to afford the things that they need, whether it's a house, whether it's a car, whether it's expensive domestic appliances such as refrigerators and all of that. What His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is saying is that what he's going to do, one of the first actions he's going to take in office as president, is he's going to work with the Central Bank of Nigeria to we're going to use the word encourage or incentivize the domestic money banks in the country, all the banks that we know in this country, to have a certain percentage of all of their lending to the real sector, meaning that they have to devote a certain percentage of lending to the common, ordinary Nigerian consumer who has a legitimate salary of 100,000 naira, 300,000 naira a month, etc., proven salaries that they can bring documents to say this is my income. You now have to loan to them. Now, this is what we're talking about. For automobile purchase, we're going to create a national consumer credit system where they can go to the bank, and because of the benefits that through the CBN we're going to be giving the banks, such as new interbank settlement offers, new benefits through the monetary policy ratios and the like, we're going to be offering them incentives to say, look, we'll do this for you, but you're going to ensure that you free up capital for the ordinary Nigerian consumer to use to better his or her own life. So that's on the one hand. On the second hand, housing is a big one. What we're going to do is we're going to create mass housing is a huge opportunity for two reasons. One, we want all Nigerians to have receive that dignity that comes with home ownership. But number two, and most importantly, you're going to have millions of Nigerians employed in building these houses. But you have to have a system. You cannot fund people to build houses if people are not off-taking and buying those houses, because that's how you afford construction. So what we have in place, and I want to be very clear with all of our listeners so that they can hold His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu account to these promises. In housing, what we're going to do, first of all, there are three layers to this thing. The first layer is we're working with the National Assembly to totally reform and modify the current Land Use Act in the country to ensure that we streamline the process of land acquisition within the states. You know, it's a constitutional prerogative of the states to control land and access to land. So we're going to work with all states of the Federation to streamline the process of accessing land for developers, so that we don't have the situation which we have had for many decades now, where because you might have a very effective government in Lagos State, for example, that's cosmopolitan and sophisticated, they have streamlined their process of land access. But in a state like maybe Bauchi or Zamfara or Kogi or some other state, it may be much more difficult, it may be longer, more time consuming. You might have to be paying bribes in the State Ministry of Lands. What we're doing is we're going to streamline a national process so that every state, irrespective of political affiliation, will have the same process. Then I just want to land, this is very, very key for people to understand very quickly. I'll be very fast. Is once we have streamlined the process of both time frame and cost, right, everywhere in the nation, the second level is we are going to work with the Central Bank of Nigeria to incentivize the developers. These are the people that come in and want to build on the land that they are acquiring from the state governments. We're going to give them an incentive to devote as much of their development as possible to social housing, so that in exchange for them devoting their construction, their developments to social housing, that is housing for poor Nigerians and middle income Nigerians, that we're going to give them tax incentive, tax rebates, tax credits and the like to incentivize that. Then finally, this is the last part. The third level is we're now going to ensure that the Central Bank of Nigeria incentivizes the banks through what I mentioned, the monetary policy ratios, interbank settlement offers and all of that. They're going to incentivize the banks to now offer the lending for those home mortgages on those social houses, so that the average Nigerian who's earning 100,000 naira a month or 500,000 naira a month can go to the bank and say, this is my income, this is my employment letter and all of those details, right? And then he can, based on his legitimate income, they will now agree on his monthly payment for that house. It's historic. It's historic.
To return quickly to the tax issue.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. Is that what you want me to do now?
Yes, please.
Okay,
absolutely. Absolutely. So, His Excellency has been very clear that his goal is not to raise taxes at a time when we have a fragile economic environment internationally and domestically, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to consolidate on what His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari has done in tax administration. What have we done? We had a situation, and most Nigerians don't even know this, from 1960 to 2015, we only had 13 million taxpayers in this country. That's 13 million taxpayers in 55 years. Today, we have over 35 million taxpayers in Nigeria. We've almost tripled it in 7 years. Most people don't even give us credit for that. And that is why, and people ask the question, well, how is it that in spite of all the challenges, economic recessions, pandemic, FIRS, year after year, they're reporting historic revenue generation targets. We did 5.3 trillion, I believe, in 2021. We're doing 6 trillion in 2022, and we're going to continue to go up because of this, expanding the tax net through automation. So what we're going to do is we're going to not only widen it, but we're also going to, and this is where agriculture comes into this. Right now, only 35% of all arable land in Nigeria today is under cultivation. Just consider that. That means 65%, two-thirds of all arable lands in this country are not even being touched or cultivated, despite the fact that they're ready for it. So what His Excellency is promising is that in the first term of his administration, the first 4 years, that means by 2027, by the grace of God, he's promising that he's going to raise the rate of the amount of arable land in this country under cultivation from the current 35% to 65%, so that we can mobilize rural youth to take up all of this uncultivated arable land to enhance not only wealth creation but food production and expand their involvement in the formal economy with bank accounts, paying of taxes, and all of these things. So this is all part of the plan when we talk about expanding the tax net. And then,
so will consultants be used for the
why would that even be necessary right now? See,
because there's a precedent. That's why you asked.
There
is a precedent.
See, what you do in a state, the state situation is not the federal situation, right? The state governments operate differently from the federal government in how they approach policy. What I'm saying is that when you're dealing with federal tax, the mechanisms by which you collect federal tax are not going to be the same as the unique and peculiar circumstances facing each state and each state government. So that doesn't mean that because it was done in Lagos, it has to be done exactly the same in the federal. And the last point on that is, given the success of turning Lagos State from a poor state into one of the wealthiest economies on the continent, not in the country, on the continent, through the tax administration policy that he brought in place, even if he did do that, which he has not said he would do that, has it not been effective? So these are some of the issues.
Some Lagosians will beg to differ.
Well, because I'm not saying that he said he would do so.
Like I was telling you in the morning, some will say that some Lagosians, those that have lived in Lagos, for example, I was born in Lagos, and I've seen Lagos evolve over the years. Some will say it's a glorified slum.
You shouldn't even also confuse the IGR of Lagos with the GDP of Lagos.
No, I'm not. But we're not doing it.
For the brevity of time,
IGR is also praised. The IGR is also praised.
Now, for the brevity of time,
of course.
I wanted to talk about security, but since we are on this issue, let's just talk about subsidy. He says he will end subsidy.
Absolutely.
And he will go on to implement the Petroleum Industry Act.
Absolutely.
I look at that and
it's already being implemented. Go ahead.
They say that's what he said.
Yeah, he's saying
I'm just quoting what he said.
Deepening in the implementation.
I'm just quoting what he's saying.
Yes.
So you look at it.
Yes.
We know that the Buhari administration, at some point, President Muhammadu Buhari was quoted saying that subsidy is a scam. A lot has changed between now and then. And they've always been moving and kicking the can down the road in terms of removal of subsidy because of the adverse effect it will have on the economy. What are the assurances that this time around, because you know that it changes everything when you take out subsidy. It changes everything.
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 The entire
all this is about the economy, and we're talking about housing and rest. It changes everything.
Absolutely, I agree. For the better, in many ways.
For the worse first, before the better.
We'll talk about that.
We have. Just quick
touch on it.
On the subsidy issue. Okay.
Just touch on it.
Yes, very clearly in the manifesto. When you asked the question earlier, how are you going to generate revenue? One of them is that when you say Nigeria has not benefited from oil boom, we all know that subsidy is the major culprit of why we're not benefiting. In terms, aside from crude oil theft, obviously, which we're tackling head on. But that's a major one. Now, you're talking of several billions of dollars that are going to be unlocked as a result of subsidy removal. Now, the question has always been, how are you going to remediate or mitigate the effect on the average Nigerian, which is a major concern, and which is why President Muhammadu Buhari has not been in a rush to remove it in the first place, given the current situation in the world.
He has basically shifted responsibility to
yes, he has.
to the
To
incoming
the next person.
The major, I don't want to divert, but the major reason why is obviously he recognizes that the international, what has happened internationally now, has made it even more devastating to do it at this moment than it would have been under a more peaceful, ordinary time. I think everybody in Nigeria recognizes that if fuel goes to 500 naira per liter today, there will be a major problem in the country. Everybody recognizes that. So what His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is saying is that, first of all, the timing is going to be responsible. That's number one. Number two, what we are going to do. The timing of the actual removal.
It won't be June next year?
No, I don't know. I don't know that it's going to be June.
Supposing we find ourselves in a force majeure like the Ukraine-Russia war, what will we do?
What we should not do is we should not speculate what has not been spoken yet. So I don't want to say June or August, but he said he's committed to doing it, he will do it.
Okay.
Now, the issue now is two things. One, how do we mitigate the effect?
Yeah.
A major one is saying, look, we know that predominantly it's the middle income and the poor Nigerians that are going to face this thing the hardest. The elites can take care of themselves when the fuel goes up. They can manage the situation. They can absorb it, and they might not like it, but they can absorb it. Now, what we're saying is for those who are relying on these incomes, right, very heavily, what we're saying is that we want to now, first of all, empower all of our massively increase public transport across all states of the Federation. Create specialized, real lanes for the movement. The way it's been done in Lagos, basically nationalize that. We need to create a transportation system that respects mass transit in a way that is coordinated and sophisticated and choreographed. Okay. Then, in addition to that, though we're considering how we can create potentially opportunities for those buses to now be running on CNG as against fuel, because we understand that it's going to be much cheaper to do so, and if we're fueling large transit systems with cheaper energy, then it's going to make sense for everybody and allow the wealthier people to absorb what they need to absorb.
All right, we really have to run, but you promise me
and that money is being reinvested in housing, agriculture, power, and all the other things we've talked about.
Are you able to make a response in 10 seconds?
I'll try my best.
Why is a bag of rice selling at 50,000?
Oh my gosh, fantastic question. So now, this is another area where it's in the manifesto. We need commodity boards. The reason why is simple. We have given incentives to producers who are producing rice in this country, benefiting from Inca borrows and all of that. But guess what's happening? They're producing it on government incentive. Right, now they're taking it over the border and selling it at higher rates, creating a scarcity, which increases the production.
I think what we'll say is,
I really wish I could just answer this.
I think what we'll say is, let's keep this conversation.
Nigeria needs to know. Because we're establishing a commodity board that is going to be able to stabilize the pricing of rice by establishing a minimum.
Next year. Why couldn't the man who thought that rice was important establish that?
No, but that's what we're building now. But it requires collaboration with the states. It takes time. Okay. States have to key in. It takes time.
I want to say thank you very much, Ajuri.
Thank you very much
for your time
here.
Thank
you very much. Thank you.
We wish you, APC and your presidential candidate all the best.